Good morning and happy Friday. I need a haircut. Time to go see Amo. So, where was I yesterday? So, at 8:22 p.m. on Wednesday evening, I got a notice from federal judge in Chicago that my 9 o'clock telephonic conference was now set for 9:45, and it was in person in the Dirksen building in Chicago, which, if you don't know, is the federal courthouse in Chicago. Now, I also was supposed to have a 9:45 telephonic conference at another federal courthouse in Rockford, and I was also supposed to have a 9:30 status in yet another county, which, if you're doing all of those things telephonically, is not a problem. You can be in all of those places. But since I got a notice at the night before that I had to be in Chicago, obviously I was going to be on the road, I was going to be in a building, and there was no way that I could do all of those things. Now, first of all, is that uncommon for that to happen with federal court if you're not familiar with federal court? No, that's not uncommon at all. The judge was not happy with something that actually the other attorney did in the case, and so she said, you guys have to be here tomorrow morning so we can talk about it. That's what happens when you play around with federal court. That's why a lot of people don't go do that. So the attorney called me up. He immediately sends me an email and says, oh my God, did you see this? And I said, well, yeah, I just saw it now. And he calls me up and he says, well, I can cover this. And I'm like, well, obviously you don't know how federal court works. I will see you tomorrow in the Dirksen building. Now, did I have some difficulty managing my state when I got that notice? Well, yeah, because I'm like, holy crap. Now, first of all, there was an ice storm going on around here on Wednesday evening, so I wondered about the weather. Secondly, now I'm supposed to be in 3 different places, which I could have done on the telephone easily, but I'm going to be in a car and then in a building. There's no way that I can do it, so how am I going to cover all of this stuff? So yeah, I had difficulty managing my state, and I did allow myself to get a little stressed. Now, here's the interesting part. So, turns out the next morning, the ice storm was over. I flew into Chicago easily. I was there an hour before court, before R. Kelly showed up to get sentenced, by the way. The other court date in federal court in Rockford ended up getting canceled. And the other court date at 9:30, the other attorney was unable to attend because there was a power outage. So the court just continued that case anyway. And then when I showed up in federal court, the judge wasn't mad at me. She was mad at the other side. So things all went fine. So, it's a great reminder that a brave man dies one death and a coward dies many. Even with all of the years that I've done this, even with all of the knowledge that I have, and I have a lot with how to do all these things, you still got to actively do it. And you still have to, at times, remind yourself of what it is that you need to do in order to get these things accomplished. And sometimes it happens automatically for me, but not always. And it's also a reminder that everything's going to work out in the end. If it hasn't worked out, it's not the end. I ended up actually enjoying my trip into Chicago in the morning. I haven't been into the federal courthouse in Chicago in a long time. So it was a chance to do that. Parking was easy. I got there plenty of time early. I got to meet a couple of lawyers. I got to see a judge that I had never met. I was there when R. Kelly was there. I didn't really care about that. On the way home, I was able to make a ton of phone calls. I don't ever drive in a car anymore because we normally appear in court either by video or by telephone. So I don't get a chance to have what we call windshield time and make phone calls. So I got to make phone calls all the way home. It took a big chunk of my day, which, was a bummer because you show up at the office and you got 800 emails. But it wasn't the catastrophic thing that I thought it was when I first got that notice. When I first got that notice, I was like, oh my God, this is going to be impossible. And it turns out that that wasn't the case at all. That's why you didn't see me yesterday morning, because by this time yesterday morning, I was on the road and headed to Chicago in case I ran into a huge ice problem when there was a big difficulty. Things are going to come up that we don't expect. That's part of life. Whenever somebody says, I like surprises, which I'm a person that would say that, the answer to that is, yeah, you like surprises that are the ones that you like. The surprises that you don't like, you call problems. And we all do this. And we have to remember that at the end of the day, keep it in perspective. How big a deal is it really? Look at things in the broader picture. My job allows me to do that, which was my message on Wednesday. So I gave a message about keeping things into perspective. And that evening, I got stressed, allowed myself to get stressed over this notice. But not forever. I was able to go to sleep. I got up. I enjoyed the trip in. Found myself parking, got myself where I needed to go. Oh, and as an added interesting part, my car was in the shop. So my wife and I only had one car, and she was scheduled to be in the Quad Cities yesterday. So we had to manage that. That's how life works, though. Life happens. So remember when you're scheduling your week, remember when I talked about that? You have to set aside chunks for stuff like that to happen. And tomorrow we're going to talk about chunking. That is a great thing for us to pay attention to. If that's a term that you haven't heard, if that's a system that you're not familiar with, we're going to talk about that tomorrow. It's a spectacular thing to start to learn and develop as you're using your system for structuring your day, which I hope you're doing. And remember what I said, when you have important things that, the musts, schedule time for them more than one time during the week. Do multiple times during the week, because that way, any one of those times it's going to be able to happen. So do it significant times during the week. So if you've got a letter that needs to be written, if you've got a phone call that needs to be made, give yourself 3 opportunities to do that during the week so that you have multiple times to take a look at that. And when there's something that comes up like what happened to me on Wednesday night, the other thing that you can think about is chunking, which we're going to talk about tomorrow. What do you do with the time that you have, and how do you manage that in a way to best serve you for the outcomes that you're looking for? But remember, always put first things first. If you haven't read 7 Habits, go grab it and read it. If you put first things first, then when those surprises happen, it's not going to throw you off as much, because you'll have done the super important things. It's going to set aside things that you're going to need to do at another time, but they're not going to be catastrophic. And it's always good to remember my message, which I needed to remember Wednesday night after I said it Wednesday morning, to keep things in perspective. Was it a bummer that I got that notice? Yeah, when I first got it, I was like, oh my God, this was not how I expected my day to go. Actually, the first thing I thought was, thank God I looked at my email at 8:30 on a Wednesday night, because normally I'm not sure that, sometimes I check it at night, sometimes not. Thank God I did, so I saw the notice. But at the end of the day, I actually enjoyed the morning. It was great to get to be in the Dirksen building. It was very nice to meet the attorneys that I got to meet. I don't get to do that much anymore. It was very nice to get to talk to the judge. And I also, showed up in court, and I wasn't the one in trouble, and it's going to help out my case. And I got to get a lot of other things done. Schedule times for important things, because you know that life is going to happen. And when it does, you'll then be like, okay, well, I can do those things at another time, and now I need to handle this, because problems are going to come up. And if it's a surprise that you like, then it's a surprise that's fun. If it's a surprise you don't like, then it becomes a problem. So then we shift our focus as to, okay, how can I use this? And that's the point of chunking, which we're going to talk about tomorrow. And that's how I got myself out of my pattern on Wednesday night, as I was like, okay, first of all, how can I deal with the other 2 cases? So I quickly did that. I messaged everybody in the federal case, and then I called my assistant, who was going to take care of both of those cases. My associate, who was going to take care of both of those cases. And then I thought, okay, well, what can I do with this that is going to be beneficial? So I listened to a Grant Cardone video on the way in, and then I made phone calls, and I listened to a Tony Robbins video on the way back, and then I made more phone calls, and I was able to call a whole bunch of people that I haven't talked to in a long time. So I reframed the situation in a way of, how can I make this serve me as opposed to making it stress me out? And then I learned some new stuff. I learned where to park in the Dirksen building nowadays. I know where to go. So now I know right where to go so that I can get super close. And I learned things that I hadn't learned before. Tomorrow we're going to talk about chunking. a great asset to managing your daily rituals and to managing your life. But why you didn't hear from me yesterday is I got hit with a surprise, and life happens. And it took me a minute to manage my state, but I did. And I asked the better question. How can I handle this? This is out of my control. So it is what it is. The other judges could be mad at me. Sorry, what do you want me to do? This judge says I got to be there in person. I got to be there in person. So number one, it is what it is. Number two, how can I use this? How could I use this to serve me and actually enjoy this time? That was the question that I asked, and that was a question that served me a lot better. Have a great Friday, everybody. Thank you very much for watching. It's awesome to see you. Mr. Drahobo, great to see you this morning. Mr. Dakin, Mr. Lampy, you guys are always here, regulars. I incredibly appreciate it. Tomorrow we'll talk about chunking, which is an awesome tool. Until then, we're all in this together. Let's take care of each other.